The Xelari were once a proud and thriving species, known across the galaxy for their advanced technology and peaceful ways. Their home planet, Sealar, had been a beacon of knowledge and trade in the galaxy for centuries. But that was before the war, before they were falsely accused of crimes they didn't commit. No one really knew the truth of what happened. The Xelari had been blamed for an attack on a nearby star system, a peaceful world that was destroyed in an explosion. The galaxy's most powerful nations immediately declared the Xelari guilty, accusing them of mass destruction and war crimes. Despite their pleas of innocence, the Xelari were condemned without a trial, without the opportunity to defend themselves. The rest of the galaxy turned their backs on them, leaving them isolated, abandoned, and shunned. As the years passed, the Xelari's once glorious civilization crumbled. Their cities became ghost towns, their ships drifted aimlessly in space, and their people grew weaker. The last remnants of their population were scattered in small refugee fleets, wandering through space, hoping for any sign of hope, any sign that someone would offer them shelter. Yet, every call for help was met with silence, or worse, rejection. The galaxy, once their ally, now saw them as nothing more than a threat. In the midst of their despair, there was only one option left. The Xelari had to find a new home. They had to seek refuge with a species that would look beyond their past and see them for what they truly were, innocent victims of a grand conspiracy. The only problem was that the galaxy's doors were firmly shut to them, and the Xelari didn't know where to turn. Then, after years of drifting from one dead-end system to another, they received a message, a signal from a small, insignificant world on the outskirts of the galaxy, a world that wasn't part of the Great Galactic Union, a planet that was still new to the wonders of space travel. Earth. At first, the Xelari thought it was a mistake. They had heard of humans before, but never in any serious context. The human species was still very young in terms of interstellar exploration. They were just beginning to venture beyond their own solar system, and they were still learning the ropes of diplomacy and galactic politics. Why would a young species like humanity take notice of the Xelari? But the message from Earth was clear. We hear your cries. We will help you. It was an unexpected offer, an offer that Xelari never thought would come. For so long, they had been rejected, ignored, and vilified. But here was a species they barely knew, reaching out to them, offering something they hadn't had in years: hope. The message came from Captain Elias Vance, a human officer who was commanding a small space fleet. He spoke with determination and compassion, promising the Xelari that Earth would offer them asylum and protection, at least for the time being. The message also promised that Earth's leaders would fight for the Xelari's case in the Galactic Council, arguing their innocence and seeking justice for the wrongs done to them. The Xelari were skeptical, of course. Could they really trust humanity? After all, they were an unknown species, still finding their place in the galaxy. The Galactic Council had already made it clear that helping the Xelari would lead to sanctions, isolation, and possible war. But the offer was all they had. There was nowhere else to turn. As the Xelari debated what to do, their ships, long on the edge of fuel and food, began to break down. Their fleet was too far gone, the damage too severe. They were trapped, caught between a galaxy that had turned its back on them and the unknown future humanity was offering. Finally, the decision was made. They would go to Earth. It wasn't a perfect choice, but it was a choice, and the Xelari had run out of options. Captain Vance and his team made the arrangements, guiding the Xelari ships toward Earth's space stations. The journey was perilous, and the Xelari were uncertain about what awaited them. Would humanity truly stand by their word, or was this just another empty promise in a galaxy full of broken ones? But as their ships neared Earth's orbit, the sight of the blue planet was a reminder of the one thing the Xelari had lost: the promise of a safe home. For the first time in years, there was a flicker of hope in their hearts. The question remained: could humanity's kindness be enough to overcome the galaxy's prejudice? Would the Xilari find a new home on Earth, or would their journey end in yet another betrayal? All they could do was wait, and trust in the kindness of the one species that had dared to reach out to them. The Xilari fleet slowly approached Earth's orbit, their ships battered and broken from years of fleeing across the stars. Their once proud civilization was barely holding on. And now, as they entered the atmosphere of an unknown planet, they felt a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Could the humans really be trusted? Would Earth offer them the safety they so desperately needed? Or was this just another trap in a long line of broken promises? The message from Captain Ilias Vance still echoed in their minds. "We hear your cries. We will help you." But now, standing before Earth, the Xilari had doubts. How could a young species, barely a century old in space, offer them anything? After all, the Xilari had been abandoned by far more powerful galactic empires. But there was no turning back. The Xilari ships, once mighty and full of hope, were now weakened. They had no choice but to place their trust in humanity, hoping against hope that Earth would be their sanctuary. As the Xilari fleet docked with Earth's outer space station, Captain Vance and his crew were there to greet them. Despite the galaxy's rejection, the humans had shown nothing but kindness and respect. The humans didn't see the Xilari as criminals, as the galaxy had painted them. Instead, they saw them as victims, innocent people in need of help. The first sight of Earth, a beautiful blue marble hanging in the vastness of space, filled the Xilari with awe. For so long, they had wandered the dark emptiness with no home to return to. But now, standing before a world so full of life, they dared to hope. Could this be the place where they could rebuild? Captain Vance led the way, guiding the Xilari to the station. His warm smile and welcoming presence gave the Xilari some comfort, though they still carried the weight of their past. "We've prepared a place for you to rest," Vance said as he gestured to a large docking bay, where several ships had been set up to accommodate the refugees. "You can stay here for now, while we work on the next steps. We'll make sure you have everything you need: food, medicine, and protection." The Xilari weren't used to such kindness. In all their years of running, no one had ever offered them anything more than disdain. But here, on this small station, humans were offering them shelter as if they were equals. "We won't abandon you," Vance continued. "This is just the beginning. We will take your case to the Galactic Council. We'll make sure they hear your side of the story." The Xilari listened, still unsure, but they were too exhausted to argue. They followed Vance into the station, their bodies weak, their minds clouded by exhaustion. They hadn't slept properly in weeks. They hadn't eaten enough in months. As they entered the station's medical bay, the humans quickly began to care for them, offering food, blankets, and medical supplies. The Xilari could hardly believe it. They were being treated like people, not like criminals. Still, there were many questions left unanswered. Why would the humans help them? What did they have to gain? The Xilari had learned long ago that no one acted out of kindness without expecting something in return. Captain Vance could sense the doubt in their eyes. He had seen it before, when the first human explorers had made contact with alien species. There was always suspicion at first. After all, the Xilari had been rejected by everyone they had trusted. But Vance knew that humanity had a different approach. They had learned from their past mistakes, and they would not repeat the same errors that other species had made. "We don't expect anything in return," Vance said, sensing their concern. "We are doing this because it's the right thing to do. We believe in helping others. Your people deserve a chance to rebuild, and we are willing to fight for that." The Xilari could hardly believe it. It was almost too much to accept, but they had no other choice but to trust the humans. The offer of help was their only chance at survival. Days passed as the Xilari rested and healed. Captain Vance worked tirelessly, preparing to take their case to the Galactic Council. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The galaxy had already turned its back on the Xilari, and many powerful factions would try to stop humanity from standing up for them. But Vance was determined. He would not let the Xilari suffer any longer. Meanwhile, the Xilari began to understand the humans better. They watched as humans interacted with each other, with kindness and respect. They saw how humans valued family, honor, and cooperation. In the face of their own suffering, the Xilari couldn't help but admire humanity's strength and spirit. As the days turned into weeks, the Xilari grew stronger. They began to talk more openly with the humans, sharing their story, their history, and their hopes for the future. It was the first time in years that they had felt like they mattered, that they had a future. Captain Vance smiled as he watched the Xilari slowly begin to open up. He knew that they were not just rescuing a species, they were building a new bond, one that would last far beyond the confines of this space station. The Xilari had come to Earth looking for shelter. What they hadn't expected was to find something even more important: hope. The days that followed the Xilari's arrival on Earth were filled with uncertainty and anticipation. Captain Elias Vance had worked tirelessly, preparing for the most important task of all: presenting the Xilari's case before the Galactic Council. The Xilari had been abandoned by the galaxy's most powerful species, their reputation shattered by accusations they never deserved. Now, the humans were their only hope. In the heart of Earth's capital, a small group of the most influential leaders gathered. This was the first time humanity would officially challenge the galactic powers on behalf of the Xilari, and the stakes were high. Captain Vance, along with several human diplomats, prepared to make their case. It wasn't just about saving the Xilari. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity would stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. The Xilari watched from their temporary home, a small facility within Earth's orbital station, as the humans gathered to fight for them. It was a strange feeling for the Xilari. For so long they had been told they were unwanted, that their past actions had sealed their fate. But now, for the first time in years, they were being treated with respect. They weren't just refugees, they were victims, and humanity believed them. Captain Vance's voice echoed through the chambers of the Galactic Court. His words were measured, but there was an undeniable passion in his tone. "We stand here today not only to defend the Xilari people, but to show that justice should never be based on fear or prejudice," he declared. "The accusations against them are unproven and unfounded. They are victims of a conspiracy, and humanity is ready to expose the truth." The Galactic Council was made up of representatives from various species across the galaxy, each more powerful and influential than the last. Most of them were skeptical of the humans' sudden involvement in such an important matter. Why had humanity chosen to get involved in a case like this? After all, Earth was still a relatively new player on the galactic stage. It was a brave but risky move. The representatives from the Council listened closely as Vance laid out the facts, or what humanity had learned about the attack on the peaceful star system. He explained that the Xilari had been set up, that there was evidence suggesting the true perpetrators were a different species entirely. He presented new data, information about the mysterious explosion, and the trace elements that had been ignored by previous investigations. The Council was silent. Some of the representatives seemed moved by the data, while others seemed skeptical. The more powerful factions, who had once joined in the condemnation of the Xilari, refused to make eye contact with the humans. They had their own agendas, and they were unwilling to let something as small as the truth get in the way of their power. "Why should we believe you, human?" One of the more influential representatives from the Xilari Empire spoke up. His voice was cold and dismissive. The Xilari were guilty. They have been a threat to peace for years. Why should we risk destabilizing the entire galaxy for a species that has shown no remorse for their actions? The humans stood their ground. Captain Vance responded calmly, "We are not here to change the past. We are here to ensure that the future is based on facts and justice, not fear. The Xilari deserve a chance to rebuild. They are not the monsters you believe them to be." The debate continued for hours, with representatives from various parts of the galaxy arguing their positions. Some were in favor of helping the Xilari, understanding that a mistake had been made. Others, however, were not convinced. They wanted to punish the Exilari for the destruction, regardless of who was actually responsible. As the hearing wore on, the Exilari could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. They watched the humans argue passionately on their behalf, their voices filled with conviction. For the first time, they felt that their story might finally be heard. It was a strange feeling to believe in something again, to feel like they weren't just the victims of a vast, uncaring universe. Back in the courtroom, as the debate reached a fever pitch, one of the oldest representatives, an alien named Harnack, stood up. His species had been a member of the Galactic Council for centuries, known for their wisdom and impartiality. The room fell silent as he cleared his throat. "We have heard a great deal today," Harnack said, his voice deep and calm. "And while there is still much to consider, one thing is clear. The Exilari were denied due process. Their guilt was assumed without evidence, and now they seek the opportunity to prove their innocence. This, at the very least, is their right." There was a pause as the council members processed Harnack's words. Many shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew that if the Exilari were proven innocent, it would cause a political uproar. The reputation of many powerful species was at stake. But there was also a growing realization that something had to change. If the galaxy was going to continue calling itself a place of justice, it could not allow wrongs like this to stand. "We will take a recess," Harnack finally declared. "We will deliberate on this matter. The council will reconvene tomorrow." As the members of the council filed out of the room, Captain Vance turned to the Exilari representatives, who had been watching the proceedings intently. For the first time in a long time, there was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. "Don't lose hope," Vance said with a smile. "This fight isn't over yet." The Exilari, though still nervous, nodded. They had come to Earth looking for refuge. Now, with the humans standing by their side, they had a chance to rebuild their future. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least for now, they could dream of a life where they were no longer outcasts, forgotten by the galaxy. The next day, the Galactic Council reconvened. Tension filled the air as representatives from all corners of the galaxy took their seats. The Exilari, still uncertain of the outcome, sat quietly in the gallery. They watched the humans, who had stood by them with unwavering support, preparing for the final moments of their hearing. Captain Elias Vance stood in front of the council once again, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that today could be the day that would change everything for the Exilari. The debate began again, but this time, something was different. There was an unease in the air. The powerful factions that had once been so certain in their condemnation of the Exilari now seemed less certain. As the council members began speaking, it became clear that the arguments of the previous day had shaken them. The most influential voice on the council, Harnack, spoke first. His deep voice echoed in the chamber, and everyone grew silent. "We have heard compelling evidence," he began, "and I must admit, it is difficult to ignore the fact that the Exilari were never given a fair chance. Their past has been tarnished by assumptions, not facts." There was a murmur of agreement from several members, but the representatives from the more powerful factions quickly spoke out. "Are you suggesting," one of them asked sharply, "that we simply disregard the actions of the Exilari because of some evidence presented by humans? Are we supposed to ignore their history, their past, and the damage they've done to our peace?" Captain Vance took a step forward, his voice calm but firm. "We are not asking you to forget the past," he said. "What we are asking is that you give them the chance to prove they are not the threat you believe them to be. Let them rebuild. Let them show you that they are capable of making amends." There was a brief silence before another representative spoke up. This one was from the Orcali species, a race known for their sharp minds and logical thinking. "Captain Vance is right," the Orcali representative said. "We have seen many species rise and fall, and we have seen species who, though tainted by their past, sought redemption. The Exilari deserve that same chance." The room fell quiet once again, the council members exchanging uneasy glances. The arguments were starting to shift. Even those who had been the loudest in their condemnation of the HFY were now questioning their previous stance. There was a growing understanding that the HFY's story had never truly been heard. "We must think of the future," Harnack said, his tone softer now. "What kind of galaxy do we want to create? One where we push aside those who need our help, or one where we offer a hand to those who seek to change?" His words hung in the air, and for the first time, the council seemed to pause and consider the weight of his question. On the other side of the room, the HFY sat with bated breath. It felt as though time had slowed to a crawl. They had spent so many years running, so many years hoping for a chance to rebuild, but it always seemed out of reach. But now, with humanity's support, they were on the verge of something new. Suddenly, a representative from the xenoid species, who had been silent up until this point, spoke out. "It's true," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "I've witnessed firsthand the destruction caused by the HFY, but I've also seen their efforts to survive. There is no redemption without opportunity. If we deny them this, we risk becoming the very thing we fought against, an oppressive galaxy that punishes those who seek change." The HFY felt a spark of hope. This was the first time they had heard such words. The council was no longer just debating their past. They were beginning to think about the future. Captain Vance took a deep breath, his voice steady. "I understand that this is a difficult decision. But if we do nothing, we condemn the HFY to a future of isolation and despair. If we help them, we show the galaxy that justice isn't about punishing the past. It's about offering a chance for redemption." Another long silence followed. The representatives continued to discuss, but now the tone of the conversation had shifted. It was no longer just about the HFY. It was about something larger, the moral choice facing the galaxy. Could they let go of their prejudices and help those in need, or would they continue to let fear and anger guide their actions? Finally, after what felt like hours, Harnack spoke again. "We will vote," he said simply. "But know this. The decision we make today will not only affect the HFY, it will define the future of our galaxy." As the council members prepared to cast their votes, Captain Vance glanced over at the HFY. He could see the uncertainty in their eyes, but he also saw something else, a glimmer of hope. They had come to Earth thinking their fate was sealed, but now they were seeing that humanity truly believed in their chance for redemption. The vote began, and the tension in the room reached its peak. One by one, the representatives cast their votes. Would the galaxy finally give the HFY the opportunity to rebuild? Or would they turn their backs once again? When the final vote was tallied, the room fell silent. The result was clear. The HFY had been granted their chance. Captain Vance exhaled, his heart lifting. He turned to face the HFY. "You have been given a chance," he said softly. "But this is just the beginning. The real work starts now." For the first time in a long time, the HFY allowed themselves to believe that they had a future. With humanity's help, they would rebuild. And this time, they would make sure the galaxy knew who they truly were. The HFY were granted the chance to rebuild, but their journey was far from easy. As Captain Elias Vance watched them begin their efforts to restore their homeworld, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for what humanity had done. The galaxy had rejected them, yet humanity had stepped forward, offering them hope when no one else would. Back on Earth, the leaders had made it clear that humanity would support the HFY in every way they could. Aid was sent in the form of resources, technology, and most importantly, knowledge. But even with this support, the HFY had to prove themselves. They had to show that they were capable of living up to the trust that had been placed in them. The HFY had always been a proud and intelligent species, but their past actions had left deep scars. Their enemies had painted them as a dangerous threat, and even though humanity had seen the truth, it would take time for the rest of the galaxy to change its opinion. Captain Vance knew the path ahead would not be easy. The galaxy was still skeptical, and many species would be watching the HFY closely, waiting for any mistake. But the humans, having placed their faith in them, were determined to give the Xelari a real chance. In the weeks that followed, the Xelari worked tirelessly to repair their damaged homeworld. The destruction caused by the explosion was immense, but their technological prowess was impressive. With the help of human engineers and scientists, the Xelari were slowly but surely rebuilding. The planet's atmosphere was being stabilized, cities were being repaired, and the once crumbling infrastructure began to show signs of life. The Xelari were not only rebuilding their home, but they were also rebuilding their spirit. For the first time in years, they were no longer hiding in fear. They were standing tall, proud of who they were and what they could accomplish. They were no longer defined by their past, but by the choices they made now. Meanwhile, Captain Vance continued to stand by their side. His role as the human ambassador to the Xelari had become more important than ever. He frequently traveled to their world, overseeing the progress of the rebuilding efforts and offering his counsel when needed. Every time he visited, he saw the Xelari becoming more determined and hopeful. The human presence was a constant reminder that they were not alone. One evening, as Captain Vance sat with Xelari leaders in a newly rebuilt meeting hall, the atmosphere was different from when they had first arrived on Earth. There was no longer any doubt in their eyes. They had grown into their new roles as leaders of a world that had been given a second chance. The trust humanity had shown them was beginning to take root, and they were eager to prove that they were worthy of it. "We owe you everything," Leader Talon said, his voice steady but filled with gratitude. "Without your help, we would still be lost in the dark, without hope. But now we can see the light again." Captain Vance smiled. "You've done the hard work. We just gave you the tools to succeed. You're the ones who showed the galaxy that it's possible to rise from the ashes." It was a quiet but profound moment. The Xelari had not only received help from humans, they had discovered their own strength. They had faced unimaginable challenges and come out the other side, stronger than before. Yet even as they built their new world, they knew the true test was still ahead. The galaxy was not yet convinced. Many of the old prejudices and doubts still lingered. The Xelari needed to prove that they could be trusted, that they were more than the labels placed on them by others. But there was a growing sense of optimism. The more the Xelari accomplished, the more the galaxy would see them not as a threat, but as a people deserving of respect. The first major sign of change came when a fleet of ships arrived from the Galactic Council. These ships carried representatives from several powerful factions that had once called for the Xelari to be exiled or destroyed. They had come to Earth, but not as enemies. This time, they had come as allies. Captain Vance stood with the Xelari leaders as the ships touched down on their restored world. The representatives stepped off their ships, their expressions wary but hopeful. They had come to see the results of humanity's faith in the Xelari, and they had come to judge for themselves whether or not the Xelari truly deserved a place in the galaxy once more. "Welcome," Talon greeted them. "We know that you have doubts, but we hope that through our actions you will see that we are no longer the species we once were. We have changed. We are not the monsters you believed us to be." The representatives exchanged glances before one of them, a female from the Elandri species, spoke up. "We have come to see what you have done. We have heard the stories, but we must see the truth for ourselves." As they toured the newly rebuilt cities and saw the thriving agriculture and technology of the Xelari, it became clear that their transformation was genuine. They had not only rebuilt their planet, they had created something new, something the galaxy could respect. They were no longer a broken species hiding in shame. They were a proud people, determined to move forward, to earn their place among the stars. After the tour, the representatives gathered in a grand hall to discuss the next steps. The air was thick with anticipation. The vote would come soon, and the Xelari were on the edge of their seats. Would the galaxy finally accept them? As Captain Vance stood with the Xelari leaders, he could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. Their future, their place in the galaxy, depended on what happened next. But no matter the outcome, they had already achieved something incredible. They had rebuilt their world, their spirit, and their hope. And no matter what happened, they would never forget the humans who had given them a chance when no one else would. The day had finally arrived. The Xilari, standing on their rebuilt world, were waiting with bated breath for the most important moment in their history. The representatives from the Galactic Council, after months of observation, would soon announce their decision. Would the Xilari be accepted into the galaxy again, or would they remain outcasts, forever haunted by their past mistakes? Captain Elias Vance stood among the Xilari leaders, feeling the weight of the moment. His heart raced, but he remained calm, as he always did in moments of great importance. He had watched the Xilari grow from a people on the brink of extinction to a species rebuilding their home and their future. They had earned this chance. Leader Talon stood beside Captain Vance, his once uneasy posture now filled with quiet pride. Talon had changed a lot since the days when he had first stepped onto Earth, unsure of his people's future. Now he stood tall, knowing that they had done everything in their power to show the galaxy that they were worthy of a second chance. "Do you think they will accept us?" Talon asked, his voice soft but full of concern. Captain Vance gave him a reassuring smile. "You've shown them the truth. You've shown them what you can accomplish. The rest is up to the Council now." Talon nodded, but the doubt still lingered in his eyes. The Xilari had been judged too harshly in the past, and despite their progress, there were still those who viewed them as nothing more than a threat. Their enemies had worked tirelessly to keep them isolated, to make sure that no one would ever see the Xilari for what they truly were, an intelligent, proud, and capable species. Meanwhile, the representatives of the Galactic Council were preparing for the vote. The room was tense with anticipation. The leaders of the most powerful factions, who had once demanded the Xilari's destruction, now sat together, deliberating in hushed tones. The debate had been heated, with some still arguing that the Xilari's past crimes were unforgivable, while others were beginning to see the changes in the Xilari's actions. One of the council members, a representative from the Haran, a race known for their wisdom, stood and addressed the room. "We have all witnessed the transformation of the Xilari. They have rebuilt their world, shown remorse, and worked alongside humanity to prove their worth. However, we must still consider the future. Can we truly trust them not to fall back into their old ways?" The room fell silent. Many of the council members had once been steadfast in their belief that the Xilari could never be trusted again, but now, after everything they had seen, there were cracks in that armor of doubt. Captain Vance knew that it would take only one or two more votes to tip the balance in the Xilari's favor. Across the galaxy, the Xilari waited for news. Thousands of Xilari citizens, now rebuilt and thriving, gathered in the capital city, hoping that their efforts would be enough. The news channels broadcasted the event live, and though the world was still in recovery, the people stood united in hope. Their leaders had done everything they could. It was now time for the galaxy to decide their future. As the council continued its deliberations, the Xilari representatives tried their best to present their case. Talon spoke passionately about their people's transformation. "We know we have made mistakes," he said, "but we have learned from them. We have worked hard to rebuild, to show that we are more than our past. We want to be part of this galaxy, not as a threat, but as a people who have been given a chance to prove ourselves." It was a stirring speech, and even some of the council members, who had been skeptical of the Xilari's sincerity, began to soften. But there was still one major obstacle: the fear of what the Xilari might become if they were allowed back into the fold of galactic society. The fear that they could one day repeat the actions that had once made them enemies. Captain Vance had always believed that the Xilari had the potential to change, to grow, and to be a force for good in the galaxy. But even he knew that words alone would not be enough. The Xilari needed to show their commitment to peace, to stability, and to the values that the galaxy held dear. Hours passed, and the council's debate seemed to stretch on forever. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder with each passing second, and the tension in the air grew thicker. Then, just as it seemed the decision might never come, the council's leader stood up. The room went quiet, every eye fixed on the figure at the head of the table. "The vote has been counted," the council leader said, their voice steady. "The Xilari have earned their place in the galaxy." The words hung in the air for a moment, and then the room erupted into cheers. The Xilari had done it. They had been accepted. The council had seen the truth of their transformation. They were no longer the monsters they had once been. They were a species of hope, of resilience, and of new beginnings. On the planet below, the Xilari celebrated with joy that could not be contained. The years of hardship, the struggle for survival, and the fear of rejection had all led to this moment. They had been accepted back into the galaxy. Humanity's faith in them had not been in vain. As Captain Vance stood among them, he knew that this victory was not just the Xilari's. It was humanity's as well. They had given a people a chance when no one else would. And together, they had proven that redemption was possible, that even in the darkest of times, hope could rise. For the Xilari, this was just the beginning of their journey. But with the galaxy's approval, they were no longer an outcast race. They were part of something much greater. And the future, for the first time in a long while, looked bright. The news of the Galactic Council's decision spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Xilari had been accepted, their redemption complete. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy viewed them with something other than suspicion, hope. The burden of their dark past had not vanished, but they were no longer defined by it. Their future was now open to endless possibilities. On the Xilari homeworld, celebrations erupted. Cities that had once been reduced to ruins stood tall again, gleaming with pride and new hope. The people danced in the streets, their hearts light with joy. It was a moment many thought would never come, but it had. The Xilari had been given a chance, not just by the Galactic Council, but by humanity itself. And now, they would prove that they were worthy. Captain Ilias Vance watched from the balcony of the human embassy on the Xilari planet, his heart swelling with pride. He had seen this journey from the very beginning, when the Xilari had been an isolated, distrustful people. He had seen the struggle, the fear, and the doubts. But now he saw something different, something stronger. He saw a people who were determined to move forward, to build something better. Beside him stood Talon, the Xilari leader, who had become not only a symbol of his people's resilience, but also a close friend. Talon looked out over the celebration, his face a mixture of relief and wonder. "I never thought this day would come," Talon said softly. "Not for us. Not for my people. I thought the galaxy would never give us a second chance." Captain Vance smiled. "You earned it. You and your people. This is only the beginning." Talon nodded, but his eyes betrayed a deep sense of responsibility. "It's not enough to be accepted. We need to prove ourselves. We need to show the galaxy that we are not just a race of survivors, but a race with something to offer." The human ambassador, a woman named Lyra, joined them on the balcony. She had been a constant ally to the Xilari since the very first contact. Lyra's efforts had been instrumental in bridging the gap between humans and the Xilari, and now, standing in this moment of triumph, she was as proud as anyone. "I think you've already done that," Lyra said with a smile, watching the Xilari people below. "You've shown that redemption is possible, that change is not only possible but achievable." Talon looked at her, gratitude shining in his eyes. "We could not have done this without you, without humanity's help. You believed in us when no one else would." "We believe in you because we see the potential," Lyra replied. "You're not just part of the galaxy now, Talon. You're part of something bigger. The work you've done, the relationships you've built, those will last far longer than the scars of the past." As the celebrations continued, Captain Vance, Talon, and Lyra watched the new dawn rise over the Xilari world. The stars, once distant and cold, now seemed within reach. The Exilari were not just survivors anymore. They were partners, allies, and friends. It wasn't just about the Exilari being accepted into the galaxy. It was about humanity proving that kindness, patience, and belief in second chances could bring about real change. It was about the galaxy itself evolving, growing, and understanding that even the darkest of pasts could be overcome. Days turned into weeks, and the Exilari began to integrate into the galactic community. Trade routes were established, diplomatic talks took place, and the Exilari worked side by side with their new allies, building a future not only for their own people, but for everyone they could help. Their knowledge of advanced technology, combined with their new commitment to peace, made them valuable partners to the many races in the galaxy. As for Talon, he never stopped looking ahead. The Council had accepted his people, but that was only the first step. He had promised his people a better future, and now he intended to deliver. His leadership would be tested every day, but he was no longer the uncertain leader of the past. He was the leader of a people who had risen from the ashes, stronger than before, with a future full of hope. Captain Vance, who had become close to the Exilari people, knew that their journey was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and challenges would always arise. But with the Exilari's resilience and humanity's support, he knew they could face anything together. In the heart of the Exilari capital, a new monument was erected, a symbol of hope for all races in the galaxy. It was a simple structure, 3 hands reaching toward the stars, human and Exilari hands intertwined. It was a symbol of unity, of a shared belief that despite the darkness of the past, the future could be built on trust, cooperation, and a willingness to give others a second chance. As Captain Vance stood before the monument, Talon beside him, he realized just how far they had come. Together, humanity and the Exilari had forged something new, a future where even the most troubled races could find redemption and a place in the galaxy. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had been worth it. The Exilari had been given a second chance, and they had made the most of it. Now, the galaxy would never be the same again. With the first rays of the new dawn shining across the sky, the Exilari looked up at the stars, no longer outcasts, but proud members of a galaxy that had finally given them the chance to shine. And with humanity by their side, there was no limit to what they could achieve.